Elena Bishop was used to the finer things in life. She was a successful businesswoman who lived in a stylish apartment in the center of the city. Every morning, she would step out in designer clothes, heels clicking on the pavement as she made her way to her luxury sedan parked in a reserved spot. She worked hard for her success, and she didn't mind that people knew it. As far as she was concerned, she had earned every bit of the life she led. But one evening, while heading home, her car started making a strange noise. It was subtle at first, a soft rattle under the hood that she could ignore if she turned up the music. But the noise soon turned into a loud clanking, and her car began to stutter and shake. Alarmed, she pulled over to the side of the road. She checked her phone and located the nearest mechanic shop, just a mile away. Without many options, she called a tow truck and waited by the roadside, muttering to herself. Her evening plans were ruined, and she hated being stranded like this. When the tow truck finally arrived, the driver took her to a small, modest-looking garage on the outskirts of the city. The place was dimly lit, with a few rusted cars parked outside, and the sign above the door simply read, "Calvin's Auto Repair." Elena wrinkled her nose, unimpressed by her surroundings. This was not the kind of place she would ever willingly bring her car. Inside the garage, a man in his 30s, dressed in a blue jumpsuit with grease-stained hands, looked up from under the hood of an old pickup. He was tall and lean, with sharp, observant eyes, and he wiped his hands on a rag as he approached. "You must be the lady with the Mercedes," he said with a warm smile. "I'm Calvin. Nice to meet you." Elena barely acknowledged his introduction. "How long is this going to take?" she demanded, crossing her arms. "I have places to be, and I'm not looking to waste my whole evening in this garage." Calvin's smile didn't fade. "I'll do my best, ma'am. Let's take a look and see what's going on." He popped the hood and began examining the engine, listening to the sounds, checking each part with the practiced ease of someone who knew his way around machinery. Meanwhile, Elena paced back and forth, tapping her foot impatiently and sighing dramatically every few minutes. "Is it really that hard to find competent help these days?" she muttered, loud enough for Calvin to hear. Calvin glanced up, unfazed by her comment. "It sounds like there might be an issue with the timing belt or maybe a problem with the fuel injectors," he explained. "But I'll need to take it apart a bit to get a better look." "Take it apart?" Elena scoffed. "Are you sure you know what you're doing? This isn't some old junker. It's a Mercedes. My car isn't just any car, you know." Calvin's expression remained calm and patient. "I understand. Don't worry, ma'am. I've worked on all kinds of cars, luxury or not, they all need a little care sometimes." Elena huffed, clearly unimpressed. "Well, I'll have you know that I'm very particular about who works on my car. So, if you're not capable of handling this, just let me know now, and I'll call someone else." Calvin gave her a small nod and continued his work in silence. It was clear that her comments didn't bother him, but she kept up her steady stream of criticism. She made a point of questioning his methods, sighing loudly every time he reached for a new tool or checked another part of the engine. And all the while, she kept reminding him of how much her car was worth and how much her time was worth. "People need to have some ambition," she said at one point, almost as if talking to herself. "Settling for a job like this, I just don't understand it." Finally, Calvin looked up, still smiling but with a hint of something else in his eyes. "Ma'am," he said gently, "sometimes ambition doesn't look the way people expect it to. I chose this job because I love it, not because I had no other options. Helping people by fixing their cars, it's satisfying for me." Elena just shook her head, dismissing his words as excuses. "Well, I'd never settle for that." The night grew darker as Calvin continued working on her car. Elena was getting colder, more annoyed, and increasingly impatient. She checked her watch, mumbling under her breath about missed dinner plans. When she noticed that Calvin seemed to be adjusting something under the car, she stepped closer and sneered. "I would appreciate it if you could speed things up," she snapped. Honestly, a real professional would have finished by now. Calvin didn't reply, and after a few minutes, he looked up and said, "All right, I think I've figured it out. The problem was with the fuel injectors, just as I thought. I've managed to clean and adjust them, and I've done a temporary fix on the timing belt. But I suggest you bring it in for a full check soon, don't want to risk it breaking down again." Elena barely listened. She took her car keys back, slid into the driver's seat, and tried the ignition. The engine started smoothly, the rattle gone. She couldn't deny that he had, in fact, fixed the issue. "How much?" she asked brusquely. Calvin shrugged. "For you, just $50, since it was a quick fix." Elena's eyes widened. $50? You can't be serious. You spent all this time working on it, and you're charging so little. Calvin chuckled. "Well, I figured that way you could go out for dinner without any more worries about your car." She stared at him, surprised and slightly thrown off by his kindness. But instead of thanking him, she said, "You know, if you charge so little, you'll never get anywhere. You're limiting yourself. People will never respect you if you don't know your own worth." Calvin simply nodded. "Maybe you're right, ma'am. But respect isn't always about money." Without another word, Elena started her car and drove away. She thought that was the end of her encounter with the mechanic. But a week later, her car broke down again, this time while she was driving an important client to lunch. Desperate, she called Calvin's garage. To her surprise, he arrived within 20 minutes, bringing his toolbox with him. He worked quickly and efficiently, fixing the issue while her client waited in a nearby cafe. When he was done, he looked up and said, "I didn't charge you enough last time, so this one's on the house." Elena was speechless. She had spent so long looking down on him, but here he was, offering help when she needed it most, without asking for anything in return. Her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. You really don't have to do that," she stammered, struggling with her words for the first time in years. Calvin just smiled and handed her the keys. "Sometimes it's not about what you're owed, ma'am. It's about what you're willing to give." Over the following weeks, Elena found herself thinking about Calvin's words. She had spent her life chasing success, measuring her worth in status and possessions. But Calvin, with his modest job and generous spirit, had shown her a different perspective, one that didn't involve material wealth or superiority over others. One day, Elena returned to Calvin's garage, not because her car needed fixing, but because she wanted to say thank you. Calvin welcomed her warmly, as if they were old friends, and for the first time, she found herself smiling back without any hint of arrogance. "Thank you, Calvin," she said sincerely. You've shown me more than you know." Calvin simply nodded, his smile kind and unassuming, as he went back to work with a quiet dignity that needed no recognition. And for the first time in her life, Elena realized that respect wasn't something you demanded, it was something you earned through kindness, humility, and the willingness to help others. She left that garage a changed woman, carrying with her a newfound appreciation for people who lived with true integrity and strength, no matter what their job was. She no longer saw the world as a ladder to climb but as a place to connect with others, to show compassion, and to be open to unexpected lessons in the most surprising places. And all of it, she realized, had come from a humble mechanic who showed her exactly what he was capable of, changing lives, one kind gesture at a time.